welcome back everybody to another Meet the Authors. We've got a great group joining us today talking about hops. So who do we have with us, Gary?
Well, Tamara, I'm really excited to say that not only do we have one author or two authors or three authors, we actually have four authors today. And what they're going to talk about is their latest book, The 4 Ds for Hop and Learning Teams, a practical how-to guide to facilitate learning from everyday work, critical and dynamic risk with the 4 Ds. With that title, that's probably all we need for authors, so we want to get into it. So I want to say a real thank you for authors because we have some folks that are up really early in the morning. So from Auckland, we have Brent Sutton, 3 a.m. there. 1 o'clock, it's Brent Robinson from Melbourne and Josh Bryant from Brisbane. And over on the West Coast with me in Vancouver, it's Jeff Lyth, and it's 8 a.m. So we're having our breakfast coffee, right? This has been obviously a really, truly collaborative effort. You can look at the geographical spread, the different time zones. And my understanding too, that there are even other contributors in the book. So we want to look at that. Well, let me start off by asking Brent Sutton, and there's two Brents. So I'll have to say Brent Sutton or Brent Robinson, to be clear. This is a fourth book in a learning team series. Now, on our April 2021 Meet the Author show, we actually had Brent Sutton, Brent Robinson, and Glynis McCarthy introduce your first book, which was The Practice of Learning Teams. So clearly this book is another collaboration, and it's really interesting because last month we had Bob Edwards come on and talk about his book, and the foreword was produced by Todd Conklin. Well, what do you know? We have another book where Todd has written that foreword as well. So great introductions. And well, Brent, can you fill us in that maybe what's the gap between what was happening in books 2 and 3?
Sure. Look, thanks, Gary, and good to see everyone this morning. Really, book 2 is when we first introduced this notion of learning from everyday work back in 2021. And we introduced it as a white paper, to get the conversations going with people. And we gave them a little bit of insights. Book 3 was our first foray into creating a learning journal for hop and learning teams. And once again, that really came about from the community, basically saying, how do we go about improving practice? And we know that reflection is a really important part of learning. So we built a reflective journal to help guide people through that process.
Okay, great. Well, the 4 Ds, Jeff Lyth, you had a lot of involvement in coming up with the 4 Ds. Can you share with how you did that?
Sure. As a set of 4, I think it really began in 2018 in Las Vegas, because what happens in Vegas doesn't always stay in Vegas, I suppose. Ivan Puplady was making a presentation there, and he didn't have a slide on this. It was just kind of a story told in passing, but he mentioned coming out of the U.S. Air Force, the kind of final order to a new pilot would be, don't do anything dumb, dangerous, or different. And given the military context and everything, that was interesting. But he said he came to the U.S. Forest Service and was applying, a lot of these principles quite early on. And so he flipped those 3 questions to be proactive rather than a command, rather than a sort of a controlling tone. He flipped them in the U.S. Forest Service to say, tell us when something seems dumb, dangerous, or different. And so he switched that into that proactive mode. And that really struck me. And I pondered that for a while, thinking about my industrial clients and the kinds of conversations we wanted to start. And it felt a bit like a 3-legged table for some reason. And I think the other thing we added difficult for industrial operations. And then it became a set. It became a little set of questions that I thought would be really useful in just getting right into starting these conversations with our frontline experts.
Great. Thanks for that. Well, Josh, why don't we start going through the 4Ds, and can you tell us what's dumb about?
Yeah, it's the first of the Ds is really about sense making. So we really need to get an understanding of the groups, of these work groups, and getting their experiences about, what actually makes sense and doesn't make sense. Sometimes there's critical information that we give out to our workforce and we think that the message has got through. But to them, it actually, it makes no sense the way that we've communicated that. What we found a lot with asking this question about, look, can you tell me about things that are dumb in this area, is that actually it's risen a lot of waste, where things are repeated. People might do inductions 3 times to get onto a site, and they're all exactly the same thing. So, that doesn't make sense. Like, why do we have to do it that way? That's what that question's all about. And what we're trying to do is actually show a lot of appreciation about their work environment, and what's actually makes sense and doesn't make sense to them, because we're the ones who create that. And it's also, whenever we've had an event, we always put yourself in that other person's shoes. Like, why does it make sense for them to do it at that time? So yeah, by asking that first question, can you tell me what's dumb? It's all that framing around sense making.
Yeah. Right. Do you kind of get blank stares when you do ask that question? What's dumb about? But what
No, but the thing is, that's common language on a frontline worker. Like, tell me about the dumb things that we make you do, and they will open up immediately.
Good. Okay, good to know. Well, Brent Robinson, dangerous sounds like something to do with safety risk. Can you expand on that?
Yeah, thanks, Gary. What we're seeing with dangerous and the way that we've been using dangerous is that the organization looks at a task specifically and says, there's some danger there. We've assessed the risk. What does that risk mean?
Of a lot of people, including the Trump campaign.
So it's an organizational context. So they might have used a 5x5 matrix or whatever it is to determine some risk. But what we're using it with the 4Ds is, how does the worker see risk? And it's the context that they're working in. So, an example would be on a construction site, we've assessed the risk at 3 or 12, whatever number the organization likes to use. But the workers are seeing dangerous differently because they might have a lot of mobile plant moving around them. So that's where the 4Ds are feeding that back to the organization to put context around it from the worker's point of view or the frontline team's point of view. And so that's where dangerous really plays a really important part in the 4Ds.
Yeah, okay, understand that. Good.
Gary, I'm just going to interrupt for 1 second.
Sure, go ahead.
Sorry, I'm going to ask the audience to make sure that you're muting. There's a lot of people breaking into mics, and so I will be muting people if your mic opens. Go ahead, Gary.
Okay, great. Okay. Well, Jeff, you kind of got into adding this difficult as the 4th G. Can you go into a bit deeper into that? How did it come about?
I think at the time, so the way the first 3Ds, the original first 3Ds showed up, it seemed to be like, it was like north, south, and east, with no west. I've always talked about these Ds as like the cardinal points of the compass. And so it did feel like something was lacking. And so when I was thinking about it, industrial ops and the places where I hang out, the workplaces I hang out in, I think too, had been an incident around that time that really did involve workers encountering difficulty in a task. And in that case, it had a horrible outcome. There was some difficulty they encountered. They were close to finished. They tried harder without questioning the source of that difficulty, and it ended up horribly, and somebody was killed, I think. So it really made sense that if we're inquiring about these sort of 4 cardinal points of operational rubs, anything holding us back from peak performance or understanding peak performance. It really seemed like difficulty in performance of task really represented a full quadrant there of these 4 cardinal points we wanted to be inquiring about.
Yeah, yeah. I know that quite often we like what we call stable systems, and they just seem to work here. But I remember, I think that pops in the book, that Todd Conklin states that death hides in normal work.
That's right.
That stable systems make risk detection difficult. Can you expand on that?
Well, that's exactly it. It's our traditional. I had felt in my career that our traditional ways of inquiring and about that really fell short, and it might have been our approach as safety professionals, or a disconnect with the workforce, or some hindrance. So we really wanted to know. We really wanted to empathetically understand and really experience or hear a lot about the detailed experience of the performance of work from their perspective. And it is exactly that, how these small, weak signals that wouldn't traditionally be shared, or often are not traditionally shared, can be really significant. And so in order to unpack those sneaky ways that death hides in ordinary work, difficulty was a huge part of that.
Oh, I see. Okay. Well, let's go back to Josh and just talk a bit about the last D, which is different. And in the book, can you explain this in terms of weak signals?
Yeah, so if the first D, dumb, is about sense making, and then you've got dangerous is around risk, and then difficult is around challenge, what difference is it's really about change. It's those asking the worker, how are you navigating how you planned your day, and how's that going? And you could link that back to, how was work imagined, and how's work is done today. What a different can do is really unveil weak signals, and these weak signals can really be quite a good indicator of any issues that might be coming up. And they might not seem huge now, but might become significant in the future. It could be, can you tell me about what's different about today? And the conversation with the worker might be along the lines of, the machine's making a different noise than it was yesterday, or what, I've worked at this plant before. I got transferred to this plant, and you guys do things completely different, and this is why. But it's also like but the focus on the conversation around different is really about change. Like, what is it that's different from yesterday? Is there anything that you didn't expect was going to happen that did happen? Can we talk through that? So that's where the difference been. For us, it's really helped understand a lack of standardization between our work sites, where we can go, well, why is that different to that site? Why is that machine different to that one? Why is that technique different from here to here? So yeah, Gary, that's where we use different.
Oh, great. Okay. Well, thanks, guys, for a brief introduction to the 4 Ds. Just want to look at some of the stuff in the chat panel and some questions. Like Rosa, you asked a question about this word sense making as being too academic. Can you open up your mic and just share your thoughts a bit about that?
Sure. In fact, I will confess that I used the word sense making when I was talking to a team that I was working with, and they accused me of being too academic. And I was kind of stunned in the moment because what we were doing was that we were trying to get consensus on the meaning of a very difficult situation. And I was just kind of stunned that they thought it was a waste of time. And one of the reasons was that it was too academic. So I just wondered if you had any thoughts, any of you had any thoughts on that.
Yeah. So fellas, do you use the word sense making, or do you use making sense when in your conversations? Brent,
no, we use.
tell
us what's dumb.
Yeah, we get with the construction guys, the word dumb is we've designed something that they're going to put on a building somewhere, and they go, why did you do it this way? This is really dumb, right? So it's coming back to the organization. And there's been some discussions on LinkedIn about using dumb, and it's not a good word to use, but really it's the way that they see it and what we're asking them to do. They go, this is dumb if you just did this. And that's the thing that I've really been blown away by when we've started these conversations, is that they actually come up with the solution. And they're not just driving safety, they're driving everything from innovation to product improvement, and in the context of what we're seeing. That's what blows me away about it. It's actually the first time that we're getting stuff flowing freely from the frontline teams back up into the organization, through the design, through project management, all the things that might be happening. So it's super powerful.
Yeah, we're not in, none of these Ds are intentionally, they're not deep dives into any of these things. We're scratching the surface of sense making and decision making, and it's really not to go there. I would suggest that part of the difference is generational change and turnover in the workplace. And when you're having that conversation, sometimes in my industrial ops, common sense, the term common sense comes up. And some of these folks miss those years when they could rely on some kind of common sense. So to me, when we're asking about what's dumb, what doesn't make sense, we're kind of getting over that old, another generation's dependence on common sense, and we're inquiring into what makes sense, how it makes sense, does it make sense? So sense making in the loosest, Rosa, the loosest sense probably of the term.
Yeah.
And when we talk about dumb, we are looking at it, how the workers have used the system. So really we're saying, as a worker, I am dumbfounded. That I'm doing things this way. It's not dumb in the sense of people are dumb. It's my view of the system. It is the rub or the frictions that exist in black line, blue line. It is the things that I'm having to adapt and change, which, Rosa, is what you asked about dynamic risk. In dynamic risk, we have to adapt because that risk is always changing. So the 4Ds is that sense-making, if you want an academic term, a sense-making mnemonic.
Sense-making
that allows, it's a sense-making mnemonic that allows an appreciative understanding. So homage to Edgar Schein. So rather than appreciative inquiry, it's about appreciative understanding through the lens of the worker, not through the lens of the system, the lens of the worker.
I just wanted to ask a question picking up on this thread that you're unraveling, about the generational changeovers, the stigmas, the biases, etc. For a long time, the workforce, and people have heard me say this before, have been told to do, not think, right? Nobody really cares that you have an opinion or a brain in your head. Just do the job that you're here to do. And so in my experience, this attitude that's come, I'm going to use the word down here because it has, from the hierarchy system in previous decades, come down to the workers. Now you have a lot of workers who don't feel comfortable coming forward and risking talking, which is a big critical issue because there's so much wealth of information, like you were talking about. They have solutions, they have innovative ideas, they have all of this locked in their brain. How does our generation crack that walnut open? Because there's a golden egg in there.
Nice.
Ask better questions.
Yeah. That's
Yeah. Tamara, a century of that top-down sort of Tayloristic, don't think, just do as we say, and overcoming that, to go out passively at all and begin to inquire, it's still maybe not safe, so I think that what we've seen happen with the use of asking better questions, asking these questions, is it really shows we do care. We're specifically asking. We're not just ceasing to push down. We have to go more than our half of the way in this inquiry to demonstrate we sincerely want to have this question and we sincerely value that other view. So it's taking steps like this, I think, might be just begin to overcome that century of the opposite.
I'm going to
Yeah,
push
and
back here for a second. I'm sorry to cut you off,
No.
but this is going to be an uncomfortable question that I'm
Good.
going to bring forward. Okay, because you
You
guys
ready,
are
Josh?
You ready,
Yeah,
guys?
bring it.
Because you're all white males. You're all
Yep.
white males
Yep.
of a certain privilege. Okay, and so you're saying, "Oh, ask better questions." I'm going to be quite candid with you. You can phrase your questions as delicately and nicely as you guys want. A lot of the workers I know would still not talk to you because they're scared, they're oppressed, they are marginalized. And as soon as you guys leave and you go back to your safe place up in corporate office, they are going to get pulled into the office. They are going to be reprimanded by management. And many of them, and if you know anything that's happening in Toronto right now with the Metro grocery stores on strike, and this is a big reason for this happening, their hours get cut for work, for speaking up. This is the reality of the workplace, not as imagined in people's heads that you can just have these nice, open, better conversations, better questions, etc. How do we break the fact that for a lot of people, it is not safe to talk to you?
So, Tamara, I can answer it. One of the ways that we've been doing it is that the guys on the construction sites that we're working with have a QR code on the back of their hard hat, and they don't have to tell us who they are. They can just send something in and it just flows in. This freaks the safety people out sometimes because they go, "Oh, we've got to fix that." Well, no, you don't. They're telling you something, and it's a bigger problem, and it sort of feeds into that weak signals discussion we're going to have. So it's open, and you're right. The organization has to be willing to listen, but more than listen, it has to be willing to learn. And I think, you're going to have organizations out there that aren't ready for that. And, that's where it's going to be. But once you start seeing the unencumbered, hey, this is what's happening, the context of what we're doing, and you're asking us to do, and you go, wow, the first thing is, God, that hurt a little bit. That wasn't comfortable for us. But it can be anonymous, and it's not forcing anybody to actually do anything. And so they have of the people that were on site around Australia that I was working with yesterday on 7 different sites, there must have been 40 people across those 7 sites. There was some 4Ds that were flowing into the business, into the organization. And, we don't check who's doing them. We'll talk to the guys on site, maybe at a pre-start meeting or a step pre-start meeting. And that conversation will flow then. But I take your point. Yeah, we're 4 white privileged males, and it's different in different contexts for different organizations.
Yeah,
That's one way we're dealing with it.
Tamara, it's Josh. It's an excellent question. I mean, I've worked with leaders who have said to me, "You mean you want me to give positive feedback for people doing their job? I only give positive feedback when they do something extraordinary." And I go, "Well, what about your dog? Do you only pat your dog when it does something right? Or do you just pat your dog because it's the right thing to do and it loves it?" So it is changing the lenses of leaders. And then I did like the example that you said, is that, someone will come out and they'll ask these 4D questions and they'll go away, and then the middle management come in and then they'll get almost like punished. The upper leadership needs to show that middle management that they are genuinely interested, and they'll actually do something with this. Like, I'll give the example with the 4Ds information. You need to close that feedback loop. Otherwise, it's just going out having a chat and walking away and nothing gets done. Like, to build trust and credibility with your workforce, particularly that middle management and leaders, you need to show that you've listened, and that you're actually taking action with what you've learnt from those 4Ds as well. And that brings credibility and trust.
Yeah. Go ahead, Jeff.
One thing I felt listening to Tamara's awesome question was, what came to mind is what I call safety 1.5, and that is, a safety 1 mindset using safety 2 language to go out and ask these questions, but of an old school mindset. And that's like the weaponization of this. And I guess there's some risk there. I mean, I think I'm really hopeful that anybody who finds out about this and wants to go and try asking these questions is of the right sort of headspace to not play gotcha or not use these questions as a trap. And I think too, the person asking these questions, you're a human asking other humans questions. So there's an accountability there to ask them sincerely, to hear sincerely, and to own that information. And as Josh says, close the loop, do something with it. And so it becomes, there's an accountability there between humans, maybe, that I hope becomes more dominant or more important than, certainly more than anybody playing gotcha with these terms.
Yeah. Okay. Well, what we have on the in our audience are a lot of practitioners. They're interested in the how-to, and this is a how-to guide. So I'm going to ask Brent Sutton. Can you just walk us through how the 4Ds are used by learning teams? Like, do you guys have a prescribed sequential process or method that you follow? What happens?
Well, that's the thing. I mean, first of all, the good thing about a learning team, it should be organic by its nature. So I might share with you an example. We were asked, we're just wrapping up a project in the maritime sector across the entire maritime industry as part of a court process. And we've been working with about 400 people through that process. And one of the organizations was seeing symptoms of bullying and harassment. And they asked us to support them in running a learning team because they felt that as an organization they weren't well equipped. And they said, well, how are you going to do it? And we said, well, what we're going to do, we're going to come in and we're going to ask the workers about normal work. And I arrived in the room. There's a whole lot of people that are very skeptical about why they're being brought into a room. Okay, because normally they're only brought into the room when things are going wrong or they're being told off. And all I did is I put up on the board behind me the 4Ds and I wrote the words down: dumb, dangerous, difficult, different. And we sat down and said, guys, I'm here to listen to you. Can you tell me about, in your normal work, what are the things that you encounter that are freaking dumb, that don't feel right, that are harder than they should be, or different from what you normally do? And I can tell you now, guys, the stories they shared, because it's all about stories, the stories they shared with us showed us all that rich context of all the conditions that existed in the system that were creating those symptoms and behaviors. And what the organization learned through observing that was that when they go out to the field, they are simply focusing on symptoms and behaviors and outcomes, and they're not seeing the conditions that are present that create that environment. And the 4Ds go straight into the conditions. Now, what shocked me was the fact that the safety team 2 days later said that this group of people are now actively engaging with us about the stuff they find dumb, dangerous, difficult, different. Whereas before, that safety team called that group a bunch of complainers.
Oh, wow.
And I would share with you that complaining was the only way of expressing how they cared because no one was listening.
I'm glad that you said that because that resonates, Brent, with management calling the workers children or whiny.
Yep.
Any infantilization. Sorry, it's early.
That would be
Yeah,
a word.
any of that. You're right, Tamara. You're right.
Yeah, okay. Wow,
And it's
interesting.
that storytelling. It is that storytelling. And what you'll love, Rosa, was that we were able, the feedback from the workers was how they psychologically felt afterwards. It's like there was a weight being lifted off them. And in the end, when we presented this back to the senior leadership team, and with the workers were present in the presentation, we're able to share stories of when workers felt that safety was being done to them versus when safety is being done for them versus when safety was being done with them. And the organization sat there and said, and apologized to the workers for not supporting them.
Yeah.
Because we removed that confrontation through storytelling, because it didn't talk about individuals, it talked about the system and the conditions in the system.
Yeah. For me, it comes back to you, Jeff, that safety 1.5. We talk the safety 2 language, but they do not realize they're stuck in that dominant safety 1. Then it's like, oh my God, this is what we've been doing to employees. So it is a bit of awakening, which I think is really, really good.
That's
cool.
high praise coming from the safety 3 guy. So thank you for that.
I'm still trying to get to 2.1. So thanks, Gary, you're way ahead.
I have a question. Oh, go ahead.
Tamara, I have a question about,
Sure.
because this is a how-to. You're all external consultants. Looking back on your experience as an internal, what would you tell yourself that you know now that you didn't know then?
Josh is an internal.
Yeah,
Josh is
I'm
an
internal. So I'm general manager for basically a service providing company to mining. So 25 different clients, 900 different employees. What would I tell myself?
Yeah.
So good. I want to come back to, I've been asking the wrong questions. Going in and asking someone, hey, tell me about, I'd like to congratulate you on your housekeeping. This is really good. Oh, can you talk me through your task? Oh, look, I don't like the way you're wearing your gloves and I don't like the way you've got that set up. Can you and I agree to an action that you'll fix this and then that way we can move forward? That's going in as a leader and the leader having the answers. What this has actually done is now approaching workers with this 4D is you're together. It's actually like you're working on this together. They're better questions. And you're actually unlocking the richness through their eyes, not coming in and giving them the answers or thinking you've got to have the answers or thinking that you know everything. It's actually stepping back as a leader and actually being more humble. And the 4Ds is just an easy way to unlock that. Rosa, someone said to me that they got a copy of the book and they read it. And they said they took a lot of time reflecting. And the big thing that they said to me that they reflected on the most is that a lot of the conversations they had in the field as a leader were purely transactional. It was never genuine about learning and being interested.
I think the thing that I get out of it, and it really resonates with what Josh is saying, is I come from a lean background. That's where I started off my working life. Before it was called lean. That's how old I am. I'm not going to say how old I am, but it's been a while. And I came through businesses where we put DuPont stop system in, and as a leader thought, oh, that was a really good idea, And then you finally get to the point, go, God, that is not working for us. We're not learning anything. And so what I would go back and do is say, this really aligns with some of those lean, those quality things that Deming talked about in his 12 points, as does Hop. And you just have better conversations and you're learning stuff. And it's when you actually go, wow, if we'd known that 3 months ago, if we'd known that 4 months ago, and as I said before, it's not just about safety, it's other stuff that's coming through. It's it's improvements in our system, it's improvements in our product that are flowing through from these, and that's what's sort of blowing me away by it. And I transition between talking to companies as a external person, but also being a director of a business that puts facades on buildings. So we've got a lot of people that we deal with that when I walk in, they see to some of the other points, they see me as the leader coming in, and you don't learn anything that way. And to Josh's point, it just changes the whole, moves you from that transactional conversation to a, wow, I didn't know that. And, and being humble about it and saying, okay, cool. We've jumped, we've moved on to the next section, and it's so much cooler.
That's a great call out, Robbo. Sorry, calling out DuPont. I wanted to refer to this sort of little school of thought of ours as NewPont, but I was cautioned that might
no,
might get us sued.
It's got such connotations. I think I've got a stop card over here, actually.
I wanted to ask you guys actually a question, because I've had the opportunity to work on site, like on the ground on site, and an opportunity to work in office. And this is really a struggle in my brain, is how those who work in office are treated so differently than those who are treated doing the site work and the actual work that physically makes money for the company to continue, right? For example, in the grocery store, if you didn't have anybody in the bakery making the bread and selling the bread, etc., then you really wouldn't go so far in grocery, just as an example, quickly. And so I was like wondering, like when I was working in head office, they would get to go to vision meetings and all these special brains thinking sessions and all of that, right? But when we were working in the on-site, people would come and train at us. It goes back to that conversation you were saying about doing safety with people as opposed to doing safety at people, or what was you used another word too.
But to for and with.
Yeah, that's right. So how could we start flipping the script and flipping our thinking about giving those on-site people that same type of nurture for that engaging strategy, etc.? I'd love to hear that.
Tamara, you know what I thought when you asked that was that we've used terms like knowledge workers as opposed to, those physical workers. And in this space, I think those are horrible terms. We're really tapping into the knowledge of those frontline workers. Those frontline workers are knowledge workers, they're knowledge holders, and we're really appreciating that. So when you mentioned that, the difference between office and site, that's what came to mind was those old divisions to say knowledge worker versus physical worker. And I think being of that mindset, they're knowledge workers. They hold critical knowledge to us in these complex times. So
yeah.
Look, it's interesting, guys. A number of organizations we've been talking to who have been trying the 4Ds, that they typically start with the 4Ds in the areas of the business where they perceive risk, and that's completely normal because that's the driver behind safety. But once the leaders have seen the operational improvement value of the 4Ds or the operational excellence value of the 4Ds, it is taken and then engaged in other areas of business around finance, around computing, around marketing. And what they've said is that the 4Ds is not about safety. And I think even Josh, you had experience in your own business where you started with it and then how you've evolved it into other parts of the business.
Yeah, I mean, Tamara, we led it from a safety point of view. We thought it'd be safety discussions, like, tell us what doesn't make sense from a safety point of view. But what we found is like no one in the front lines is just interested just talking about safety. They want to tell you about their work. They want to tell you about all the rubs and everything like that. So Tamara, we've only had it in place for 6 months, and it has turned our business on its head. And the very first meeting, I think our CEO said, I reckon 5-6 times was like, I had no idea about that. So for a leader getting this feedback from the workers, you've actually got to be humble and go, well, why don't they just do that? Why it's actually, these conversations are about systems and workplaces and not about people. It's about the system. And going back to Brent Robinson's point, it has just unlocked so much value and made things more efficient, made things more standardized, and the business has just learnt.
Mhm.
Yeah, I think, the example I'd love to give you is we've got a design team, and they're in the corporate office, and the project managers give them a hard time because they miss dates because they haven't got the design ready or whatever it might be. And we use the 4Ds to understand what was going on, and it's amazing what people will just put up with just to try and get their job done. And what we found was that they had huge IT issues with our servers that were hosted in Singapore, and it was taking them 40 minutes to upload 3D models to Singapore. And that's what we added it up over a week. We were losing half a person a week in time where they were doing that. And we used the 4Ds to do that. And it just, you just go, how did we not know this? Because we weren't seeing it as a safety issue. We're seeing it as a performance issue. And it was really super powerful to just turn that on its head, as Josh said, and go, wow.
Yeah. I want to turn our attention back to the book, and there's something in the book there which I want to share with everybody. Last month, we had Bob Edwards with us, and Bob talked about blue line learning. So quickly, if you want to use the terms, black line, that's work as imagined, and blue line is work as done. So I understand, fellas, that you found a way to visualize this. So can you give us more insights? How did you do that? Who wants to talk about that? Brent Sutton or Josh?
Sutton does.
Start with Josh.
Yeah. So look, when we introduced critical risk management into the business I work, we really tried to find a way to communicate that to the board. Like, what does this actually do? What does this mean? They were used to the terminology of blue line, black line, and work as done and work as intended. But what we were trying to do is give them a visual tool to go, the blue line needs freedom to adapt in these areas. But when they're interacting with hazardous energy or sticky stuff that can kill you, we can't just accept that a piece of paper and saying, hey, don't touch the spinny thing is going to be enough. So we wanted to visualize where do critical controls and critical steps fit in to a worker's normal day-to-day. And we were able to, lean on, I guess, on the shoulders of giants, but we've been able to visualize where in a process that critical controls and critical steps are that we need as a business to control and know about and make it easy for workers to do the right thing, but also where are the areas where it's easy for a worker to adapt. So yeah, in chapter 5 of our book, what we've tried to do is give the community a tool to make it easy to communicate from board level to the frontline level. And we've gone out and applied this, and they love it. They understand it from the frontline to the board. They actually really understand, right, these are where our critical energies are. This is where a critical step is. This is where a critical control needs to be. But in this area, yeah, they're free to adapt. I don't know if you want to build on that, Sutton?
Yeah, because ultimately, I think an example, and a shout out to any of my friends from Schindler if they're on the call, but Scott at Schindler, he calls them swim lanes. So the job of the organisation is to say that we want to swim from one end to the other end. And we're going to have swim lanes either side, but we're not going to tell you whether you can do that by butterfly or backstroke. But what's going to happen is those swim lanes are going to nudge you back in, because we want the adaptation to happen, but we don't want you to go outside the swim lanes because that's where the potential risk exists. So this visualization technique we've created, which is not a mathematical model, it is a visualization model, shows you those swim lanes. It shows you, for those people from the quality world, it shows you the upper and lower control limits. And the 4Ds shows you where people are at if they're moving up or they're moving down towards the hazard.
Nice. I like that. That's good. And I know that
Yeah, and
it's just a-
it's a good question there from Tanya. So I guess Tanya's just asked the question, well, how do you know they've got it? Well, we've actually gone out to the workforce, and when we've talked about the implementation of a control, and we've used this I don't like the term visual storyboard, but it's like a visual risk mapping. They understand that in the work sequence, why does a control need to be where it needs to be? Because they can actually visualize that the energy does increase in this area. And we can't allow people to adapt in this area. And that's why we need a control. So I guess when I say, yeah, they get it, the feedback's been quite positive from frontline workers to go, that's really helped me understand why I'm checking that control. That's really helped me understand why that step's important and why you've highlighted it in the standard work instruction. And from the board, they've just gone, now we understand why we need to give capital and improve the controls in that area, because we can visualize that area of the task. Yeah, look, there's a slight likelihood that we may have a thing, the worst that can happen is a hand injury. But in this area, we could actually kill someone. So we need to unlock capital and let you improve your controls. So when I use the term they get it, there's been a demonstrated understanding from both workers and the board that they can understand work.
And they're also telling us when things don't work. So we should have I see Jim Moranis is on the line. Big shout out to Jim and Tony and Ron for their work with critical steps, because we pay homage to their work through this notion of visualization.
Right.
So it's really important that the 4Ds can show us when that blue line is moving away and when that blue line is moving down.
Right. Cool. Right. Okay. Well, sometimes I know that we don't know where to start, and we think all this stuff, 40, this is going to be a huge transformational change. However, Jeff, you mentioned there's a technique term, the Trojan mouse. So can you explain what that is?
Simple revolutionary acts, little simple reversible experiments that we don't need to ask permission for. It just comes from years of it feels like beating my head against the same spot on the same wall, or struggling in helping organizations evolve by coming in the front door and approaching it. I don't know. Approaching this change or this evolution, I think maybe incorrectly, thinking that it was a big change or a big thing or required a big effort or a Trojan horse to go through the castle gates, because there's this big us and them, and it's this, just metaphorically, it was just all wrong. And so what we've seen has great effect. And two, asking leaders to take a leap of faith into a new space was not very effective. So by using Trojan mouse experiments, repurposing a work observation, one leader repurposing a work observation, flipping the script from DuPont to NuPont, having a different 4D conversation, owning that story, but taking that nugget of proactive learning and improvement, that little Trojan mouse experiment yields this little story, and that little story can be sent up the org chart as a success story of proactive learning and improvement that was done with existing resources on existing time and yielded far greater benefit than had been done previously. So that's something a whole lot more tangible. And when that goes up layers of the org chart, each layer says, hey, that's a terrific little thing you did there. You had a little interaction, you learned something, you improved something. We like that. Let's see more of that. And so I just found, without going in too large, without going into significantly, but making change in this resource constrained world, just by repurposing things we already do in these little safe experimental ways. And so we've just taken to calling that the Trojan mouse approach. And a lot of folks have had a lot of success just by just getting out and doing in safe ways, and not waiting for anything too large that requires permission or requires leadership to take a leap of faith. I think every human being who has to go out and do a work observation can change their questions. A simple rebellious act. Go ask different questions without permission and see what you get.
Yeah, Gary, it's a move away from transformation and just, you know,
Yeah.
those 100 small things, those 100 small nudges. Like an example we did is we just took statistics out of our communication to our workforce. Just took it out. Took away days lost, injury-free days, took all that crap out. And then we took away TRIF and we didn't tell anyone that we took it away. And these little nudges, and then you start showing what's actually important to the organization. You know, what are you making important when you communicate an event? Do you go, everyone needs to retrain, everyone needs to reread this procedure? Do you take that stuff out and actually make it about the human going, hey, we learnt this when this event happened, and these are the things that went well? You know, changing the language of the business, but just doing it in really small, like, yeah, using the Trojan mouse to make small little changes rather than this, hey, look at the new poster and we got new shirts and we're going to do this theme. It's moving away from that thinking.
Well,
And also, and when you do transformation, you know, you get leaders buy-in because they're driving the transformation. And many times you do get buy-in from the front line, but there's also what we call the frozen middle.
mm,
And the frozen middle is that group of managers who live out these transformations that come about every year, every 6 months, every 3 months. And what the Trojan mouse approach has shown, that frozen middle, is around operational improvements and operational excellence. And when that frozen middle see the value in creating small change, then they want to take ownership.
mhm.
Because if that change is positive to the business, because remember, they're getting it from the top, they're getting it from the bottom, they're stuck in that center. If they can start to see the value from that, then they start to become the voice of change.
Yeah. So, some of this
In the past, they're the
conversation,
ones that try to control change.
yeah. When I was reading your book and your talk about Trojan mouse, Jeff, made me think back all the years I took away senior leadership teams on 3-day retreats to do mission, vision, values. And I go back and think, like, what was I thinking at the time? I think what I would do differently is take away for 3-day retreats and do the 4 Ds. So fellas, where you sit in the middle, what's dumb? That's difficult, right? I'd be really interested. Then from that, it's like, oh, maybe there's a different strategy that will emerge as opposed to some milk and honey vision that's out there, which we will probably never get to anyways. Let's work with where we are today with limited resources and see where we can go from there and make these small things. And guess what? Some may go viral as well. And not only do we get the middle guys, that frozen middle, excited, then we can move that up the ladder as well and get the board excited and do the same stuff. So I love the 4D thing right through the whole organization. Really great.
You are okay. I'm just thought I'd tell you.
I think we have to make it safe for that frozen middle.
Now you know what I feel like.
Bob has to be muted, thank you.
You know, we've in these
Sorry.
in these conversations, we've realized that in this organizational change, there's a lot of folks through that middle layer that are really at risk and like they're in that sandwich. And so these little safe, proactive stories of learning and improvement make it safe to communicate up. It's all layers of the org chart. Yeah.
Yeah, cool.
Could I have been in the midst of lots and lots of interviews with OSH professionals, and a lot of them feel that they're not listened to, their recommendations are overlooked, disregarded, ignored. And it seems to me that what we're talking about here would be a great way for such a person to begin to create change without having to get permission, without having to get backing from management. So how could we get this information out to all of these students in the university who are going to be stepping into a career filled with obstacles, and when there are many things that they could be doing that would work? Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. It also connects with a question that an ESH project lead in Ireland asked about: how do we get my team to understand this? So I'll see what you're saying, Rosa. Well, how do we get the education level down to the students? Well, to start talking differently and asking better questions, right? So your thoughts here, guys? What do you think? What could we do?
Rosa, when you were saying that, what came to mind was in past years, attending a lot of traditional safety conferences. And what I was seeing was a lot of speakers coming in that were from a sales perspective, a lot of keynotes or presentations from sales gurus. And a lot of the messaging some years ago was, how do we sell safety better? What can we learn to like sell this down? And I thought, wow, you're learning how to sell harder and nobody's questioning what it is you're trying to sell. And I think question your product, like in safety, it should be flying off the shelves. If we're doing it right, it shouldn't be a hard sell. So I've always thought, if we had to learn from sales gurus how to push our safety one thinking, and we never really question that safety one thinking. I think it's an excellent question. And going back to an earlier point made about confidentiality, confidentiality is something that's offered, I think, in beginning these conversations in case people in certain areas need it and require it. And two, the amount of prep that has to be done for those basic assumptions in the safety professionals, and switching to that questioning of their, I never questioned my black line, for instance. I just enforced it. Now I question my black line. Safety hasn't questioned what it was selling. And now I think it really needs to look empathetically at what it is that it's selling. And I think these questions get us over that with minimal preparation and effect on basic assumptions.
Yeah, Rosa, Dave Proven, and I think David Wood is the one who came up with the term, but what's your role as a safety professional when you come out, when you're new? What do you think your role is? And your role is to create foresight about the changing shape of risk before it leads to harm. And how do you do that? You could use the 4Ds to go and ask better questions and understand normal work, and that you will make a bigger impact on the business than rolling out a hands and fingers campaign.
Very good point.
How to get the word
I
out.
think from my perspective, Rosa, we're asking people to listen and not judge. And our observation is listening is really difficult for some people because they have been predicated on this notion of find and fix. And we're trying to say that the paradigm shift is to listen, understand, learn, and then improve. So just imagine we're trying to slow a little bit down. But what's interesting is that once leaders have said to me, we didn't know how to listen.
Yeah.
Okay. And they've thanked us because they've said, you've actually given us the space to listen, because the 4Ds has created that permissions thing with the front line, where the front line aren't expecting them to actually fix stuff. And so it's a bit like knowing you how to have a good conversation.
Cool.
Great
Well,
conversation.
It is the top of the hour. So, as you know how we always wind it up, I always ask for the 3 takeaways, but since we have 4 authors, I'm going to ask for 4 takeaways, and I would like to ask each of our authors that we have, what would be the one takeaway you would like to leave today's group? So let's start off with Josh. What would you like to leave?
This book really is written from a practical aspect. It is aimed at frontline supervisors all the way up to board level. It is written in that language and that way to help you really unlock value in your business. It will be overwhelming what you will learn. That's probably the one thing that I will leave you with, that it will be it will like come at you and you will learn so much, and it can be overwhelming. Just do the Trojan mouse one bite at a time, just one little nudge, one change, one learning. I'll leave it at that. But please, this that book is written very practically minded.
Great. Brent Sutton, what's your one takeaway?
That leveraging on from Josh is that sustainable change that sticks, only happens in small increments. Big change never sticks. So the Trojan mouth is that strategy to create sustainable change.
Right, great. Brent Robinson.
For me, it is, we started it with safety in mind, and it's moved right across the whole business. So it's about improving the business, and that's what's blown me away. It's been a really, really interesting process to watch that from the front, and driven from the front line. It's everything that we've wanted, and I think everything that Deming probably wanted as well. So I'm really enjoying that at the moment.
Okay, and last but not least, Jeff, what's your one takeaway?
Really foundationally, I would say that the 3Ds originated way back in the military in a kind of a command and control sense, and it was about the person. It was directed at the person to not do anything dumb, dangerous, or different. And the big thing I would want to say is that remember that this is about the system. We're asking people for their reflections on the system. So we're valuing the people. We're respecting the people in their intelligence and insights. It's the system that we're inquiring about and asking about. So I would say that's fundamental, especially when it comes to anybody hung up on the D word, the dumb word. They're all D words, right? When we're asking about what's dumb, we're asking what doesn't make sense about the system. We're in no way being critical of the people.
Great. Okay. Well, thanks everyone for coming, and Tamara, over to you.
Thanks, Gary. And thank you to all our speakers, Brent, Jeffrey, Brent, and Josh, for coming and spending your time today, but also for opening up the opportunity for that conversation, because I actually feel today that the workforce is giving an opportunity to have some voice, and that's a great step that we're moving forward. So thank you for that. And thank you to our audience for once again coming and joining us for the hour and sharing your thoughts and insights with us, because without you, we wouldn't have this show. So thank you, everybody, and stay safe.
Thanks all.
Thanks.
Next
Yeah.
time.